Hello. I just wanted to come on here and share a few things with you from this past Wednesday night's Bible study. And the title of our lesson was You Must Walk by the Spirit. You must walk by the Spirit. And truly, if we rely on our own wisdom, we will make bad choices. And in this chapter, Philip was guided, Peter was guided, and Jesus, even Jesus Christ himself, was guided by the Spirit. And so we ourselves must walk by the Spirit. And it will do us all good to let the Spirit lead and guide each and every one of us in everything that we plan to do in this life. We must walk by the Spirit. We must be led by the Spirit. We must be in tune with the Spirit. And the other thing is we must be willing to go. So this lesson says you must was from Galatians, the 5th chapter, verse 16. I say then, walk by the Spirit, and you will certainly not carry out the desire of the flesh. Walk by the Spirit, and you will certainly not carry out the desire of the flesh. See, sometimes we confuse being led by the Spirit with our own feelings. And in Romans, Paul said, when I try to do good, evil is always present. Every time I try to do right, I find myself doing wrong. He was saying that every time I try to stop messing up, I find myself messing up anyway. Doesn't that sound like just some of us? Every time we try to do right, evil is present on every hand. Every one of us has suffered from what we call at times the can't help it. Well, here God told Jeremiah, in the book of Jeremiah, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. And it was Paul that God gave the comforting, inspiring words of Romans 8:28. And we know all things work together for good to them that love God and to them who are called according to his purpose. I don't know about you, but I'm glad that God knows what he is doing in my life in spite of my things that I do, in spite of the mess that we're in. I'm glad that he knows what he is doing in my life. Aren't you glad to know that God continues to work in your life in spite of all the things that you do? And of all the wrong that we do, he continues to work in our lives. But we must remember that regardless of our past, God has a plan for our lives. Regardless of what you're going through, he has a plan, and it's all a part of his plan. Remember the story of Jacob and how he swindled his brother out of his birthright? And later in his life, his mother, she comes up with this grand idea to trick her sick and half blind husband into giving Esau's birth blessing to Jacob. All of that was part of God's plan for Jacob's life. So I want to encourage somebody today. You may not have walked the straight and narrow all of your life, but just remember, God is able to fix you. Isaiah 1:18 says, though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be white as snow. And anyone would think that a person that has been so evil and crooked all of their lives couldn't possibly change. You would think that the crookedest and the most evilest person, you would think that there is no way that person has changed. There's no way that person has become a preacher or a minister. There is no way. I remember when, and I know when that person did this and did that, but there's no way. But I come to tell you tonight, there is nothing too hard for God. There's nothing too hard for God. All he needs is somebody that is willing to stand. He's willing for someone to say, here am I, send me. That's all he wants you to say is, here am I, send me. I don't care what everybody else says or thinks about you. Just keep on saying, I promise him that I will serve him till I die. Just like in that familiar song that we sing so often, I'm on the battlefield for my Lord. I promise him that I will serve him till I die. And that favorite part that I like about it is, I was alone and idle. I was a sinner too. I heard a voice from heaven saying, there is work to do. People of God, there is work to do. I took my master's hand. See, when you took his hand and you joined the Christian band, you said, I'm on the battlefield for my Lord. So stay on the battlefield. Once you join that band, stand, be able to stand for something. And that's one of the favorite songs that we sing. And so next time you run into one of your haters, just tell them, you may be only able to see my failures, but God has the ability to see my potential. You may see where I'm failing. Man looks on the outside, but God looks on the heart. Where we are today has nothing to do with fate, and it doesn't have anything to do with luck, but it has everything to do with the plan, or the predestined plan that God has for your life, or for our lives. Our circumstances prepare us for what God has in store. Many would have thought it was over for Jacob when he was run out of town. And however, it was all in God's plan. Jacob was where God needed him to be. He was right where God needed him to be. Sometimes God has to allow us to be run out, so to speak, or taken away from places where we're used to being comfortable, because we can't be productive and we're just wasting our gifts, so to speak. So he wants to take us somewhere to where we can listen to his voice. And while Jacob was in the middle of running, he laid down on that rock pillow. And while he was sleeping, he saw the vision of the ladder coming down from heaven where he was. And on the ladder was angels ascending and descending. And God shows Jacob in this vision that what he had provided for him, he had provided for him this round clock protection. Isaiah 43:2 says, when you pass through waters, I will be with you. Remember that God will be with you. And through rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. And when you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. The old saints would say it like this: all night, all day, angels watching over me. And before Jacob could mess up again, God met him while he was alone. It was at this place, instead of getting rest and devising a devious plan, that Jacob was wrestling with God. Jacob wrestled. He wrestled with him. And God knew that in order to change Jacob's ways, he had to change his walk, and he had to change his name. God gave Jacob a limp. And he gave him a limp to remind him of who he was. And he also gave him a new name to remind him of what he was able to do. So if we rely on our own wisdom, we will make bad choices. But we have to rely on the wisdom of the Lord. So in last week's lesson, we found out how Peter and Philip were guided. And we found that Jesus himself was also led by the Spirit. So if we walk by the Spirit, we won't carry out the desires of the flesh.